Yo, 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 yo. What is going on, CoD Familia? It is your boy BN. Today, there has been a leak, but in an official way, because we know that leaks can come from this area in COD, from the Hall of Kings chat, apparently, quote unquote. And it revolves around starting zone selection. Now, this is something that I'm sure many of you who watch my content know that I've been advocating for this for a while. I don't know any other kingdom builder that has this where it allows for you to select the starting zone in KvKs, and we've talked about the implications of how this could be done, what the benefit of it is, how it's really just a massive W in the long run if you opt to do it this way. And there are other ways that you can still conduct KvK matchmaking and kingdom placement in KvKs. But this has ultimately really become one of the hot topics in the CallofDragons community. Why? Well, because depending on how matchups play out, on where kingdom starting zones are, can very well determine whether or not that KvK is going to be amaze balls or if it's going to be amazing less balls, if you catch my Mary Kate and Ashley drift. Where I'm going with this, simply put, is that it is no secret to anyone that you often hear about KvK diplomacy wins happening. It doesn't mean that every KvK group is having this happen, but every KvK cycle and season, you can look to, let's say, a small amount of KvKs and say, that looks like that could be or could have been kind of a KvK Diplo win, where basically it's just one side, whether it's one, two, or more sides, there's one side that's unbalanced versus the other, enough to where it's a very clear advantage, if not an overwhelming advantage. And again, not to say that I'm going to dredge up some of the past KvKs, but if you pay attention, you know. And so I want to get to a screenshot that was provided on the official COD Discord, which apparently comes from the Hall of Kings chat for a piece of feedback that was provided, or an answer from the dev team. As always, if you guys enjoy the content, make sure you throw us up, because that was a lot. Okay, so this was posted by Barracuda. Now, doesn't mean that this person was the one who was in there and did it. They could have got it from someone else. But this is what was supposedly in there. So we're going to read this and react to it. So selectable starting zones. Number one, the bullets are most likely the points that the kings or queens have brought up. And then below that is the dev team or COD team's response. Let the kingdoms decide which zones they should start in to accommodate more potential matchups instead of being stuck with unbalanced sides. I mean, not necessarily the way that I would have written that up, but okay. Zone locks, etc., due to bad matching for the different zones. Now, keep in mind, depends on the KvK season, because not everyone is necessarily going to get zone locked. As far as, well, I guess I should say invaded, right, in zone one. I guess technically, yes, the zone lock is appropriate. Let us vote for starting zones. Okay. The answer, Daily Double. We currently do not plan to enable the feature in every season. Okay, that's pooey. It's pooey in a sense. However, we are planning to introduce this feature in future seasons. Okay, awesome. It may not necessarily be done through a voting system, as we recognize that the first kingdom to make a selection would not be able to determine its neighboring opponents, which could put it at a disadvantage compared to others. We're still in the process of evaluating and optimizing the approach to ensure fairness for all participants. Okay, listen, I've already laid out how to do this. At least some ways on how to do it that I think would be most fair. And I'm going to do that again here. So before we do that, let's talk about some of the reactions here, which is, okay, let the kingdoms decide which zones they should start in to accommodate more potential matchups. I mean, it is true in a sense that you can get more potential matchups, but it's really more about the balance of matchups that can occur. The zone locks, bad matching for different zones. Again, the bad matching for zones, it can happen. It doesn't mean it always happens. Sometimes you can get good Zone 2 matchups, but then the Zone 3 matchups are messed up. Sometimes you get bad Zone 2 matchups, but then the Zone 3 matchups are good, but then you get nothing for Final Zone. Again, I understand it's kind of more of a generalization. They're just summarizing points that were made. It's not like we're seeing exactly what the feedback was provided by the kings or queens. And then let us vote for starting zones. So I don't know if they mean like let's vote to see what the starting zone is going to be in the KvK. If so, I don't think that's the right approach, right? For me, and again, we'll go back to in-game just to give you an example. So let's take, let's take this as an example, right? The latest War of Last Snow's KvK map scenario. In this idea of doing selectable starting zones, the way that this would play out in the beginning is you have to look at this as prior to you selecting. Initially, you need to select your teams, okay? Which in War of the Last Snows, they're already kind of setting you up for this, right? You're selecting your team depending on which one you fall on, right? For Team A or Team B, we'll just use that for now because there's two sides. And you have to see who you're going to team up with. Now, there are, again, you can look at that and even break that phase down where maybe you say, okay, well, let's do it where we can each choose and select who we want to team up with out of the kingdom pool, right? So you have all the A, B, C, and D seeds, and then you can select. And again, I'll have to look at it because I didn't follow this one that closely, so I don't know exactly what the process was there. But either you have all the kingdom pool and you get to select who you're going to go with, or you get automatically seeded and then the system auto pairs you with other teams or with other kingdoms, right? At the same time while trying to avoid paragons, if that's still the case here for War Last Knows. I can't remember at the moment. I'm having a little bit of a brain fart. But you understand what I'm saying. It's like either it's all pretty much in manual control for the community, for the players, the kings or queens, or the system seeds you and then the system pairs you, right? So it's either kind of a manual approach or an automated approach. But once the teams are set and it's this team versus that team, in a KvK where you don't have set starting zones already, the idea is you form your allies beforehand so you know who's going to be on whose team. Ideally, that's how you'd want to do it. Now, you could make the argument and say, okay, well, boss, what if that's not the case? You could still do it even if it's not. It's just, I think things go smoother if you already know who's on your team and you're kind of placed into this pre-group, if you will, compared to if you're having just to say, hey, do you want to ally? Do you want to ally? And then it's just like, 6 or 8 kingdoms or 4 to 8 kingdoms that get put into a KvK and, at least for the higher ones, right? And then at that point, everyone's kind of at this like passively free-for-all approach where everyone has to select individually. I just feel like that can get a little bit messier. It doesn't mean that maybe there's not a time and a place for that. But for now, I think to keep things simpler, you establish a team and then you move into your zone selection. Now, how would that work? Well, one of the ways you could do this is by allowing the team, for example, you could do when... Gosh, what am I thinking of? Well, now this is going to be difficult because I was going to say you could do and use your EOTC or your Brink of War, but the problem is that they switched Brink of War now, and now it's in the beginning of the season. They would have to switch Brink of War back to being before the season starts, and then competing in Brink of War where it's like you still have the individual, you can still have the kingdom, but then you have like the union. Right? So it would be like Team A versus Team B. And then on that one, whichever team wins gets to pick first. So you do it like League of Legends. Like this is one way to do it, where whoever wins Brink of War as a team, which is the kingdoms that are a part of your team or your group, you guys go first. So you get to select first. And then the other team gets to select twice. Your team selects twice. And then they get to select last, right? Or however it works. So it's like 1, 2, 2, 2, 2, 2, and then 1 right at the very end if need be. And so that's one way to do it. The other way to do it is you could allow for people to pick based on their placing. Now that's a little more, it could be a little more unfair because you could have the top 3 kingdoms be the top 3 kingdoms on one team. That could be the case. And then you have those 3 kingdoms that get to pick first, right? You could also do it where you have prearranged placements, kind of like how War of the Last Snows is, which again, in those KvK scenarios, I don't think that's bad. I do think it's okay if they have pre-selected starting zones for the teams, and they're doing it in a way where it's kind of opposite, right? So it's like team A here, team B, team A, team B. So you know there's a high percentage chance that you're going to get those zone 2 matchups, the zone 3 matchups potentially, and then the final zone. The idea is how are we going to, because really what you're trying to address here is how can we get action from zone 2 all the way to final zone, right? We don't want to have, and that doesn't mean that you're fighting 24/7 throughout the entire zone or throughout that zone's duration from when it opens up until when the next zone opens. Now, maybe you could be, but again, I'm not advocating and saying you need to be going high intensity, high velocity, high member activity, like drain all your resources in zone 2. We're not saying that. But being able to have that opportunity to at least have a couple days of fighting, even if it's in the beginning of each of the zones, as you lead up to the final zone, which should have the most amount of fighting, that's what I would say the expectation is. And that's what we're trying to hit. So again, that would be another way that you could approach it. But like I said, this is really more for the KvKs, like a winter is upon us, where you don't have kind of the preset teams. You need to either have preset teams, or if you don't have preset teams and you're going to allow the kingdoms to select individually, and they're just going to do like, because it's not official, you're not on a team. So it's more of like kind of a handshake thing. And right. But at that point, if you do it like that, you also could, have some of the betrayal stuff happening. If you're already on a team, it kind of eliminates to a degree some of the betrayal stuff because everyone's kind of selecting who they want to be a part of, right? At least you believe that it should minimize some of that potential for that playing out in any of the KvKs. So again, I think those are probably the 2 to 3 most likely situations on how you do something like this. And what's important is that you test it. I'm not saying this should be added and then it's just the standard going forward. Maybe it could become, maybe it doesn't. What I'm saying is I think these are the most likely ways that you test out a system in a KvK. You get feedback and you fine tune it. Because to me, again, now, unless you're going to do something that is like you're going to end up doing like some crazy KvK scenarios in the future where, like for example, you try to do a free for all, right? And you try to incentivize, like, to me, I think it would be dope if they did some kind of battle royale, like 4 kingdom free for all, and they put certain incentives in there, certain rewards in there, certain tasks and goals to reach that incentivized people just to have as much PvP as possible. So that way, if you did a kind of 4 kingdom, like a true free for all, where you not to say that you don't want people to team up, but it's like you really want to incentivize that KvK game type or game mode to truly be a 4 kingdom free for all. Like I think that could be dope. You would just have to do it in a certain way that would hopefully very much again incentivize true free for all play. And that could even be like its own KvK scenario. Again, there's so many ideas that I have as far as how they could do a bunch of different KvKs, and it doesn't always have to kind of be the same standard stuff. But most of the time, for what we've been seeing since KvKs started in Call of Dragons, has been kingdoms being placed after the matchmaking phase, or being automatically placed after the matchmaking phase, and then them having to figure out who they're going to work with. Instead, do it the opposite. Allow the kingdoms to figure out who they want to work with before they get placed. And then you either pre-place them based on every other, right? So it's every other around the map, or it's like a north versus south, west versus east, northwest versus southeast, right? And it's pre-selected, or you allow them to choose their starting zones. again, these I would say are like the most important things if you're really trying to build out a KvK from the ground up that is going to be able to have the most amount of PvP potential and the most amount of fighting potential throughout the KvK season. So again, that's what I would say. The part that they did say in this note, lastly, about, it may not necessarily be done through a voting system. We recognize, in the beginning, where they say we currently do not plan to enable the feature in every season. Again, now that I really think about it and I'm kind of talking it through for a minute, I can agree to an extent. I don't believe that it absolutely has to be done every season, unless it's something that is just such a raging success. Like I said, there's the one way to do it where you allow it to be selectable. The other way to do it is where you allow the teams to form first, and then they get slotted into pre-selected zones. But what you could also do is have the pre-selected zones, allow the teams to be formed, and then just allow the kingdoms to choose where they want to start, right? Because maybe, and again, I don't think this is a hot take. I actually think this is a pretty solid take on this for what I'm about to say. You may have situations where the two teams, enemies, talk between one another and say, listen, we want to fight you. Do you want to fight us? Okay, you go here, I'll go here, right? And I think that actually is probably more of the state we want to get to, which is, but it's not just favoring one team or another, but it's also favoring the matchup for your kingdom versus another kingdom, right, that are on different teams. There's nothing wrong with being able to go to the enemy and say, listen, we're going to start here. We want to fight you guys in zone 2. If you're down, start over here, right? Now, yes, you could also have situations where you have feints or people that start in a certain zone and then they go to a different zone because maybe they're trying to find an easier matchup. I think those are things that, to me personally, I think it's less likely to happen. It's not to say that it won't happen, because I'm sure it may, but I do think it's less likely, especially if the KvKs, especially if you increase the kingdom pool, which reduces the margin of error for having unbalanced matchups or kingdoms in certain KvK groups that maybe shouldn't be there. You increase the likelihood that all the kingdoms there deserve to be in a particular KvK group, like when we've talked about the number 1 KvK group, or the number 2, number 3 KvK group, right, from the main kingdom pool, right, which is the G2 pool right now. These are all things that could really be positives and W's if it's done right. Again, this is just me kind of talking out, some things that I've considered and some things that I'd like to see tested first, and then build upon that. So again, we'll see what they do, but there are ways to get this done. That's what I'm trying to say. Anyways, with that being said, that is it for me. I hope you guys enjoyed this one. And let me know what you think. How would you like to see it done? What do you think would be the best way to go about doing the starting zones, whether you're teaming first, teaming after? What process do you think would be most likely, even if it's something that's different from mine? Let me know in the comments below. That's it for me. As always, until next time, we'll catch you later.